Hello, good afternoon. My name is Alex Bradford. I'm the owner of Milo in Spain, and I'm delighted to be talking today to Mark Elliott, who's the owner of Fluent Finance Abroad. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Alex.
How are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you?
Very good, and thank you for joining us today, Mark.
No problem at all.
So one of the reasons I've invited Mark over today to talk to us is a lot of our clients are interested in buying Spanish property with a Spanish mortgage. And Mark is a qualified mortgage broker in Spain,
Yep.
and also the UK.
And also in the UK.
So basically, you're the bridge between both financial cultures.
That's what we hope to be. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Excellent. So Mark, just tell me a bit about yourself and your company then.
Okay, so I was born in the UK. My mother is actually Spanish from Madrid. So I grew up between the two countries, both cultures, where I've been able to speak both languages since a very early age. I studied in the UK, went to university in the UK, and I got into the financial services industry in the UK. So I passed my investments exams and what they called the financial planning certificates. And then after September 11th, I was lucky enough to get a job in the mortgage industry in London for a company called John Charcoal, which is fairly well known in the UK. It's actually going to complete 50 years, which is quite a landmark. And that's how I got into the mortgage business, and I passed my necessary exams. So that's why I'm a UK qualified mortgage consultant. But because of my language skills and my history with Spain, I was lucky enough to get offered a job in 2004, and I've been here doing Spanish mortgages since then.
And since then, Mark, your business has grown?
Yeah, so 2004 I came with a company. In 2006 I created Fluent Finance Abroad. The mortgage industry in the Western world was riding a crest of a wave back then, as I'm sure you remember. And then we had to sort of take stock when the 2008 financial crisis occurred, and that hit Spain pretty badly. And so since I operated as a one-man band sole trader until around about 2014, and that's when Fluent Finance Abroad, as you see it today, started growing.
And how many members of staff do you have now?
So we have two offices. We have one here in San Pedro, Alcántara, in Marbella, and another one in Pueblo Nuevo de Guadiaro, which is Sotogrande area. And over the two offices, we have a total of 14 staff.
Oh, congratulations, Mark. That's a real success story then.
Thank you.
It's great to hear that. So basically, the key question some of our clients ask us is, why would I use a mortgage broker? I always recommend an independent mortgage broker. Perhaps we could have it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Okay, well, a mortgage broker is focused on how to get money from lenders in the most cost-effective and efficient way. I'll give you an example of how a mortgage broker is used in the UK. 75% of all mortgage business is actually done via the mortgage broker network in the UK. That's how important mortgage brokers are. Spanish banks or a Spanish mortgage broker is let's say 20, 25 years behind the UK in that sense. So it's a fairly new thing, a fairly new concept. But because of the way the world is changing, Spanish banks are trying to encourage mortgage brokers because they are not willing, or they don't see the value of investing in frontline staff for many reasons, because the world is becoming more digital, they prefer online banking, and they also, I believe, and this is I think from the UK, is that they pass the responsibility of advice, of giving advice to the mortgage broker. So when a client comes to a mortgage broker, an independent mortgage broker, really important, is that they will be dealing with an expert who has access to funds from not just one lender, but from the whole of the market.
Right.
So you'll be passing the responsibility of finding the money for your purchase to someone else who's actually doing that on a daily basis.
Okay. So you would go to a range of mortgage lenders to find a suitable product for a client.
For sure, because not all clients will fit a particular bank. So number one, the client would want to get the mortgage that they require. And so you need to go to a number of different lenders because one size doesn't fit all. Some banks would prefer employed applicants rather than self-employed. So you need to understand that. And once you've got the amount of money that you actually need, then you need to then, work out what the best rates, what the best actual physical mortgage is going to be for your circumstances. Now, that can change from one moment to the next. I'll give you an example. If a particular Spanish lender has hit their target for that particular year or that particular quarter or that particular month, they may increase their prices.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. But these are the nuances that people don't really understand. And this is why mortgage brokers are so important, because they've got their finger on the pulse, so to speak, as to what is actually going on at any given moment in time.
Okay, so finger on the pulse then, Mark. We've got a client who's interested in buying a property. When is the best time for them to contact you?
As soon as possible. If you're considering buying a Spanish property and you're interested in finding out how the money side of things work, then I would suggest do that before you actually find a property.
Okay. Yeah, and I agree because it's so important, isn't it, that clients, before they even jump on a plane or if they're here in Spain putting an offer in for a property and they need finance, that if they don't get how much they want to borrow, then they can't afford to buy that property. And actually, if they've committed any monies to a property, signed a contract, and they can't get the finance, they would lose that money. So from a legal perspective, it's we want them to speak to a mortgage broker up front and make sure they can borrow what they want to borrow, and then you give them the advice about what the total purchase price could be and the costs involved. Okay, so we've got a client who's contacted you. They furnish you with all their financial information. Just explain to me, what's the kind of mortgage offer in principle? What is that?
Okay, well, initially we would do what we call a discovery interview.
Yeah.
And that could be face-to-face, it could be via Zoom, it could be over the telephone. A discovery interview is us asking pertinent questions as to get the information in order for us to do a pre-qualification.
Yeah.
Now, we've been in the business 20 years. We're pretty good at pre-qualifying clients. It's in our interest to qualify our clients very well. And then a client has a choice. They can take that initial guidance, if you like, or and carry on about their business, or they can actually take it a step further and actually physically apply for an agreement in principle, a firm agreement in principle. That is when we actually collate your documentation, package it, and send it out to the risk departments in a number of different lenders to actually get a physical agreement in principle subject to you finding a property and a satisfactory survey.
And how long does that offer in principle last for?
That can last depending on the bank, some banks it will last for 1 month, some other banks. So it can be 3 months. So on average, if you take an average, it's 2 months.
Okay, so for I'm a buyer, do you charge to have that discovery? So if I want to know, what can I borrow? Would you have how much would that discovery process cost me?
Okay, so that involves a lot of work, and that involves us actually opening doors to banks and their underwriting department. So there is a cost to that, and that is something that we would have to negotiate with the client. Our fee structure works is we agree a total fee.
Yeah.
And that comes once you've actually drawn on the mortgage. Once you've decided on the mortgage, the bank and everything, we've actually done some work for you. But we do charge a commitment, which is a small amount.
Okay.
Say 10 to 15% of the final amount. That's a commitment from the client to us that they are going to instruct us exclusively and to work on their behalf to get to source them the right mortgage. And also it sort of gives us peace of mind that the information that they've furnished us with initially from our discovery call is actually true. Because, what we may say, what we may discuss initially has to be backed up by official documentation.
Okay, so basically discovery, initial call, commitment, fee being paid by a potential buyer. How long does that process generally take?
It all depends on, so let's say, for example, you're interested in buying a resale property, which is on the market, it can be sold at any time. If you supply us with the documentation that we need quickly, then we can get firm mortgage offers within 7 to 10 to 15 working days, dependent on the lender. The most important thing is that we get the first approval in, so that you know that the money's guaranteed. And then from there, is our goal then is to get as many offers as we can on the table, and then we can chew the cud to see which of the finer details actually works best for you.
So that's so important, isn't it? So potential buyers send you all this information, and within 7 to 10 days, they can find out how much they can borrow. And that's basically a mortgage and offer principle, which is binding for a month, 2 months, 3 months, depending on the lender. But that gives them the confidence and the security that they can go out and then offer on a property purchase.
100%.
Which is great. Okay. So you talk, that takes 7 to 10 days. And how long, because, we have for clients buying and selling property all over Spain, and typically the average transaction without a mortgage could complete within, say, 6 to 10 weeks. But we always find with a mortgage in place that extends. So what would you say your average time period is from start to finish for a mortgage when they found a property?
Well, there's two scenarios. You've got one scenario where the client's done their homework and they have their mortgage in place, and it's essentially they're like a cash buyer, because the only thing that you really need to do is the valuation and then organise the notary, the fine for the notary, which is the 10 working days. So that can be pretty quick. It's almost like a cash buyer, so to speak. If they find a property and then try and find, then that's when it can delay, because obviously we need to gather the documentation, we have to pre-qualify the client, we have to gather the documentation, we have to submit it to the banks. Most of our clients can be complicated because they may have businesses, more than one, whatever, and it may take some time to actually get the documents ready for the bank to accept it.
Yeah.
And then we have to deal with bank holidays and everything else that we have to deal with here.
We have quite a few of those in Spain, don't we?
So if you haven't done your homework first, if you haven't got pre-approved, then don't be surprised it could take 3 or 4 months.
Right. Okay. So it's so important, isn't it, to if you're looking at buying a property and you require finance, to speak to the mortgage broker up front, furnish them the documentation to streamline the process.
One thing I want to adhere to, sort of point out, is we're here. Obviously, we're a business and we're here to make money and help people, but we can give people information free of charge.
Yeah.
So even if you're thinking about buying a place in Spain and you're not certain if you want to use a mortgage or not, I would always recommend to speak to a mortgage broker, us ideally, to get informed. And we can do that with you free of charge. All right, so that you have the information to choose whether or not to take a mortgage in Spain or not. If the answer is no, then great. At least you're buying with certainty. At least you've explored that angle. Yeah. The worst thing is we get asked to try and fit finance in at the last stage. I've already found a property. It's a bit over my budget. Now I need a mortgage. That's when the problems start occurring. And
that's when delays can happen. Yeah.
And that's when, unfortunately, it can be a no.
Yeah.
And our job is to inform clients if it's viable or not.
And if you get a no from one lender, will you go to another?
Yeah, but we won't take clients on if it's not viable.
Right. Okay.
Because we're a success. We get paid on success.
Yeah.
So it's really important that that you do your homework. If you don't, then you could leave yourself open to having a bit of a nasty surprise.
Yeah, so it's so important to call you up front, speak to you, and furnish you with as much information as possible. Okay, good. So when I am acting for buyers and they want a mortgage, I always say to them that we will always try with the seller to negotiate a clause in the contract that the purchase is subject to a mortgage and a valuation. And if the mortgage wasn't granted or the valuation was very poor, that the buyer reserves the right to terminate the contract and recover any deposit paid. Because what happens in Spain, as soon as someone finds a property, the agent will insist on a deposit being paid to take the property off the market. And if you need a mortgage, then really you ideally want that clause included so you don't lose any money. But lots of sellers are reluctant to do that, because basically, why, as a seller, should I take the property off the market while you're sorting out the mortgage? And if you're playing catch-up, that could take 2 to 3 months. So you kind of understand where the sellers are coming from.
I totally agree. If I was selling my property, it's not my fault you haven't done your homework. It's not my fault that you haven't got your cash ready.
Yeah.
It's yours. So therefore, why should I take my property off the market waiting for you to get prepared?
Yeah.
It's not my problem.
So we always talk to clients about, you know, getting prepared, and also part of the process is we put a power of attorney in place. So a power of attorney is a document that authorises us to act for the clients in Spain. With that, we can apply for the NIEs, which are Spanish tax numbers, and we can also open bank accounts for them and sign mortgages for them. So that process, really, we encourage clients to start that as soon as they start looking for properties, and also to have the conversations that we're having now. So we will talk to them about the legal side and also recommend your good selves about the mortgage side. Okay, so they found the property, the valuation is going out. Typically, what percentage of the purchase price can they borrow, Mark?
Okay, typically, on average, for a non-resident that we're talking about, this year we've seen that the average loan to value has been around about 60-61%. That doesn't mean that's not the maximum. The maximum is actually 70%, dependent on where you are in the world, where you're applying from.
Yeah.
If you're applying from Australia, that loan to value may be a bit lower. But on average, people shouldn't really sort of calculate on the best case scenario. They should always try and factor in what we call a margin of error, a bit of wiggle room.
Yeah.
Just, you know, because not everyone gets 70%. I would suggest that out of 10 applications, probably 3 get 70%.
Sure.
And there's another factor that we need to consider is again, you mentioned it before, the survey, the property survey. Now, no one influences the property survey. It's an independent Bank of Spain registered company that goes to the property. Sometimes a property survey could come in slightly lower. Now, even if you get 70%, what happens then? The actual real loan to value would be lower because they work on the lower of the valuation or the purchase price, whichever the lower is. So these are little things that we need to factor in to ensure that there aren't any mistakes or hiccups along the way,
Sure.
which could put a deal in jeopardy.
So typically, you know, when we talk about deposits that buyers need, depending on the region you buy the property in, and depending on the type of property, so, you know, off-plan property, you pay VAT at 10%. You then pay stamp duty between 1 and 1.5% or 2%, depending on the region. Legal fees are typically 1% of the purchase price. Notary fees, land registry, you could get up to 14-15%. So for the costs, for example, for a brand new property, you need 14-50%. That would apply, I'd say, also 13-14% for properties, say, in the Catalonian region or the Valencian region, because the transfer tax there, the tax that buyers pay for on the purchase price is 10%. Come down to sunny Andalusia, it's 7%. So on top of the purchase price, you'd need 10%. So it's really important, you know, we advise our clients up front, you know, these are the costs of the transaction, you know, 10 to 15%. And if you can only borrow 60%, then you need 10-15% on top of that. So you're going to need a deposit of at least, you know, 40 to 65%.
On average, about 50%, 55%. Yeah, correct.
So it's so, you know, some clients come to us and they haven't got that deposit, and that would be a non-viable. That's a non-viable.
It could be viable, but we may need to adjust the purchase price.
Yes, exactly. So before you come out and offer on a property, find out how much you can borrow. Okay. And what age could someone borrow up to?
It's a really good question. So Spanish banks are really good at lending to people coming to retirement. So we can lend up to the age of 75. They're really good of actually bringing in family members that are younger to add weight and lower the age of the application, because a lot of these properties are actually family purchases, aren't they? They're going to be, you know, brother and sister will probably end up inheriting the property when the time comes. So we can add younger people to the application in order to make the mortgage application viable. So realistically, it all depends. But as a rule of thumb, if you're 60 and you want to buy a property, then you could probably get, you know, a mortgage for 10 to 15 years.
Right, it's amazing. And you know, you're regulated in the UK and also in Spain. when we talk to clients about the differences, the UK products tend to be shorter term products, like 2-3 years, whereas here it tends to be a lifetime mortgage. So that's why it's so important, is to get the right advice up front, the right interest rate, from a selection of the best deal from a lender, because it's such a longer term. In the UK, you can fix it for X amount of years, and then you change the deal after 2-3 years. Here people tend to have that mortgage for life, don't they?
That's right. The culture of remortgaging in Spain doesn't exist. Everything has to be done at notary, as you know. That has a cost to it. There are some real fundamental differences between the Spanish mortgage market and the UK market and the US market, for example, which makes changing lenders more complicated. You would generally have your mortgage with that lender for the term.
Yeah. So Mark, we've talked in the past. I'm an English solicitor, Spanish lawyer in Spain. We come across a lot of people who aren't regulated, so they do the conveyancing for clients, but they're not regulated. So if things go wrong, they've got no backup professional liability insurance. Presumably you've got that kind of intrusion from other people as well, often thinking they can do the mortgage deals. But what would stand you apart compared to those people?
So in Spain, regulation came in June 2019. So before then, I was operating as a unlicensed mortgage broker, just like everyone else. So our competition is other mortgage brokers, as you can imagine, licensed mortgage brokers that are registered with the Bank of Spain. But we also have to compete with unlicensed lawyers, unlicensed real estate agents, and other banks as well. My advice would be to go to a licensed mortgage expert, obviously. But these are the differences between the Spanish mortgage market and, say, the UK mortgage market, where the UK mortgage market has been highly regulated for many years. And
Mark, so as lawyers, we've got professional liability insurance. Do you have that as well?
Yes, we have professional liability and third-party liability insurance. Every single person here is fully qualified. I'm actually doing my exam at the moment to renew my qualification, and we're all doing the same thing. So all of our clients are fully protected by insurance, and obviously we have demonstrated that we have the adequate knowledge to be licensed.
Yeah, it's amazing. So regulated, you've got insurance in place, which does stand you apart from other people who might offer a mortgage, but could maybe just take the clients down to their local bank rather than offering them a range of products.
The reason why they take them down to the local bank is obviously they're incentivized to do so.
Yeah.
There is a commission agreement between.
Sure. So Mark, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
The only thing I would say is we could explore a little bit more about the importance of properties and the surveys.
Yeah.
For example, rustic properties is something which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And the importance of doing due diligence prior on the property prior to actually looking for a mortgage.
Yeah.
I'll give you just an example. On a rustic properties like fincas in the Campo, they're quite difficult or notoriously difficult to get mortgage finance on. Over the years, we've worked out why, and that is because if an unexperienced person may send a valuer that isn't experienced in that particular area or that particular property type, in theory, there shouldn't really be any issues with that as long as you do some due diligence on the property first. So what we do as a company, and I'm giving away some trade secrets, but we would actually do a pre-desktop valuation with our partners, our valuation partners, prior to submitting a mortgage application.
Right.
To establish, are we going to have any issues with the property valuation or not?
Right.
And that's something that I think people don't think about too much.
Right. So you can arrange a desktop valuation before you even get a formal valuation.
Yeah, so I'll give you a prime example. At the moment, we're working on a case with a property in Galfin, which is inland here. Anything inland you need to be cautious with, because its property's been there for many, many years. We don't know exactly how the property is registered at that moment. Obviously, the lawyer will be doing their own due diligence. But the actual tasador or the bank surveyor will have to go in and do their own due diligence. So there's nothing to stop us doing a desktop pre-val to get a gauge as to, is that price that what the client is that really what's going to happen? Because the last thing we want is for a client to put down 10% non-refundable, get the mortgage all approved, and then get the valuation back, and then all of a sudden that the property's only half registered or something. I think that's quite important.
That's a really good point, Mark, because one of the key points we advise clients when they're buying a property with a mortgage is not to sign the contract and pay 10% until the valuation has been carried out, because otherwise they could lose that 10%. And when you're buying a kind of country property, typically we won't have licenses of first occupation or responsible declarations or a habitation certificate. But what we will insist upon, again, and it comes back to the contract stage, we insist that the sellers apply for this before completion, apply for it and obtain it, is a certificate from the town hall confirming there's no breaches of planning permission. And typically a bank will want to see that.
100%.
So I was looking at a property today, a property in Granada, active with clients there, and I thought, Granada, inland, here we go. But actually, I was amazed, Mark, the Cadastral Registry, which is the registry in Spain of plans of the properties, and then you've got the separate land registry, both of them matched.
Right, okay.
So I was like, wow, this is amazing.
That's unheard of.
It doesn't usually happen. You get land registry and cadastral matching. So I was actually very pleased to say that, great, yeah, go ahead with that. We still put in clauses in there, subject to survey, subject to mortgage valuation, subject to a certificate from the town hall confirming there's no breaches of planning permission, and that the property complies with all local planning, but it's a good sign that cadastral and land registry match up, and there's no issues or no notices on the land registry.
But let me give you an example of how you would think it should be black and white, shouldn't you? You've done your research and everything matches. We've had in the past where we've had to do a number of different valuations on one particular property because, let's say, for example, we sent, or a banker sent one of their preferred partners, and they've sent someone who's an expert in Malaga City to a property in the camper.
Yeah.
Should be all the same, shouldn't it? We get one valuation because and it's been an extremely lowball valuation. We sent a different valuation company out, one that's more experienced in that area.
Yeah.
And we've actually had a much higher valuation, one that actually worked.
Yeah.
This is why the valuation is so important. And that's something with our experience and knowledge and contacts within the industry, that is something that can put pressure on a potential purchase.
Yeah, so I understand that. So yeah, it's so important to use a valuation company that with agents or valuers in that area with experience of buying property, valuing property in that area.
Completely. It's not the same. Like, for example, again, I use Malaga City. Okay, fine, but someone may be off sick who covers down Soto Grande. They may send someone down from Malaga City.
Yeah.
Doesn't understand Soto Grande at all.
Yeah.
And they're sort of going on what they see online. That could cause a problem.
And I think a lot of international clients are kind of quite surprised when they hear that we haven't got websites such as Rightmove or Zoopla which have price comparisons. All we've really got is the land registries and notaries issue bulletins now and again on a kind of quarterly or monthly basis about price increases, but they don't. What we don't have in Spain is we don't have agents putting information into a local registry saying, that property was sold for 300,000, and that is then openly available for potential buyers to see. Whereas in other countries, that does happen. Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark, for those comments. I think there's some really important comments there for prospective buyers to take into consideration when looking for a property and considering buying a property. And your details are set out below on this video. If you want to talk to Mark about finance, please give him a call. And if you want to talk to us about buying the property, give us a call too. Milo in Spain, thank you very much, and we'll see you on our next video.